My fiance's best man is planning to slut-shame me during his wedding speech as a joke, and I'm unsure how to handle it. What should I do? Original post April 1st, 2024. My fiance, best man, groomsman, and I have known each other since we were kids. We collectively met between 6th and 7th grade and have been running around in the same friend group ever since. The group has grown and shrunk over the years, but a small core of us have remained extremely close. Recently, my fiance's best man Jay, 30M, has been making jokes when we're hanging out about the two of us dating that have now escalated. Admittedly, when I met Jay in 6th grade, I had the hugest crush on him, and everyone knew. I was much taller than average for a girl at that age, and he was one of 2 guys in the entire school as tall as me. That, though, is where the story ends. I had one hell of an awkward phase in middle school, and he was very clear from the start that he was not into it. Post-awkward phase, as friends and adults, it was something we constantly joked about, but never seriously, since everything between us had always been platonic. This joke of me being rejected by him has now recently turned into how he dated me first, whenever fiancé and I are around. Despite the inaccuracy and an increase of it being brought up, everything has remained pretty lighthearted in context and, while annoying, is something I have been able to brush off or quickly rebuttal. This escalated this weekend when 2 of fiancé's groomsmen were over hanging out with fiancé and I. The wedding was brought up, and after a concerning look between the two, they mentioned something had happened with Jay they thought we should know about. Apparently Jay had been telling them stories he was considering for his best man speech, with the main one centering around how I had been shared around and had made my way through the entire friend group. While they kept what was explicitly said fairly vague out of respect for me, they were clear it crossed the line and insisted I had slept with the entirety of the group attending the wedding. They were very clear with Jay that he could not say anything like this in his speech, toast. Jay responded with an "I know," stating that I had already made it clear my maid of honor would be proofreading all speeches prior to the wedding, so he wouldn't be able to get away with it anyway. But ended the conversation by saying something along the lines of, "But what if I could?" Leaving the possibility open. Of all the groomsmen in the party, 6 including Jay, these 2 were the only ones in this core friend group, and the only ones I had any sort of history with that could potentially be notable. It was all prior to high school and very innocent. One I went on my first movie date with, where our parents had to drop each of us off because we couldn't drive, and picked us up afterwards. The other was the classic first 6-month relationship in middle school where it took 6 weeks to muster up enough courage to hug each other between classes in the hallway. Sure, we made out and very middle school level things happened, but this is something we've all laughed about now for over a decade. I wasn't the only girl in this larger friend group, and throughout the years, this was something that happened pretty frequently. Because we grew up in a smaller area, overlap happened like this regularly in every group and even more so as we went through high school. My fiancé is the only one I have seriously dated or had any sort of intimate relationship with of this friend group. We had an on-again, off-again relationship throughout high school that ended for a bit once I moved out of state for college, but we remained close friends and eventually reconnected when I moved back in 2019. We started dating in 2021 and got engaged in 2023. He's the only one in all of this I've ever slept with, who has seen me naked, and so on, making this situation even more odd and off-putting. Jay and I have been close friends since high school. When fiancé was in a toxic relationship that isolated him from Jay after I'd left for college, Jay would reach out to me for advice on school, girls, relationships and more. He had always been our #1 supporter, advocating for fiancé and I to reconcile our relationship throughout college and into adulthood. He even took a bit of credit and would throw around an "I told you so" here and there when we eventually did reconnect. I'm not sure how to handle this. I could write an additional post about how frustrated, confused, wronged, and uncomfortable I feel, all of which I plan to discuss in more detail with fiancé after sitting on the issue for a bit longer. We've all talked about it, recognizing the way Jay is framing things is wrong, but fiancé and the groomsmen are able to brush it off in a way I feel like I can't. I don't know how to move forward from this or what to do next. Additional information: fiancé and I aren't getting married until the end of next summer, so much of the conversations we had about toasts and speeches have been more theoretical, except that a few have asked for the opportunity to give a toast, including best man. We have loosely put this information in Save the Dates, on the website, and other prints. Fiancé and best man have been best friends since kindergarten. They were neighbors and inseparable until they each went their own way for college. My fiancé's parents basically raised him alongside fiancé. Jay has strictly only ever expressed platonic feelings for me. Even when both single, or alone together, we have only ever acted as friends towards each other after the embarrassing early middle school crush I had. TLDR, My fiance's best man is lying about having history with me as well as my history with others, proposing the idea that he calls me out as a joke for being shared around their friend group in his best man speech, toast at our wedding. I don't know how to move forward from this or what to do next. Update April 3, 2024. First, I wanted to thank those who were clear and honest about how alarming the situation was from their perspective. When posting, I was still processing various feelings about the matter, and still am, which not only limited my ability to really look at the situation from a different perspective, but also left me in a state of paralysis of what to do next, both long and short term. Given the nature of this situation, there was a lot of historical context that was omitted to avoid making the original post too lengthy. I have done my best to include the context that seems most relevant based on the original comments in my update below. Update. Since posting, I have spoken in further detail to both my fiancé and one of the other groomsmen. I also confided in my maid of honor about the situation for an additional perspective outside of this specific friend group. After these conversations and reading through all comments on the original post, I've come to realize the significance of a few key details. Jay has a deep-rooted superiority complex. He always has, and it is something many in our friend group have become accustomed to. He has always been the type who seemed to believe he was the standout amongst his friends. Whether that be through education, athletics, his career, or with women. Jazz has also always been a bit egocentric, and a lack of accountability or consequences for his actions has been growing for some time now. Despite it almost always being unintentional, he more often than not is oblivious to the inconveniences and harm he causes others, as long as it is beneficial to his personal ego. This is about jealousy from a few different angles, but not about me specifically. When looking at the full picture, this escalation feels like a continued attempt to knock my fiancé down for reaching that next stage in life. Whether that is because fiancé has reached it before him or has moved onward without him, I cannot say for sure. Jay has issues with misogyny that have also been escalating in tangent with everything else. His lack of respect for the women he has dated has also seemed to increase. Much of the personal tension he and I have had recently pertained to his perspective of women that have begun to veer into a more disrespectful realm, alluding to an increased belief that due to their gender alone, women are inferior. The good friend he was to me over the years, who was always kind and supportive, who never overstepped boundaries and was always there when needed, can exist in tangent with the above information. They are not mutually exclusive. Life happens and people grow, sometimes in opposite directions. I spoke in depth with one of the groomsmen to have further transparency of the situation and what was explicitly said. He acknowledged that the conversation initially centered around the excitement they had for the wedding, and Jay clearly stated he wanted to give fiancé and I the best wedding and experience possible. The conversation evolved and Jay mentioned looking for icebreakers for his speech toast and began bouncing a variety of distasteful jokes that focused more so on the expense of my fiancé than anything else. Then the idea was proposed about explicitly stating that my being passed around the friend group was how they all remained relatively close since middle school and high school. Jay was immediately shut down by the other groomsmen, told to know his audience, and also recognize he was openly alluding to things that were untrue and that could have an extremely negative impact on me personally. The conversation stopped shortly after this and the groomsmen, without context of how this issue had been escalating, chalked it up to a one-off situation with Jay acting full of himself in the moment. Fiancé and I are the first of our cohort to get married and have a full-blown wedding with a ceremony and reception. These comments did not start escalating until after our engagement roughly 1 year ago, following Jay's breakup with his long-term girlfriend. Jay has never made comments like this to me or my fiancé privately or when it is just the three of us together. Any scenario where this has been an issue has been in an environment which involved others, and mostly others that are not a part of this cohort from middle school. So what next? As mentioned in my original post, I spoke with fiancé in detail about the situation and how I was feeling. When all of this had been brought to our attention a few days prior, in an attempt to preserve myself in the moment, I brushed it off more so than I probably should have. I do not blame fiancé for not having any immediate or strong reaction in the moment, because I had avoided one myself. I think it's important to note that Jay is not a day-to-day character in our lives. While he travels frequently for work that brings him to our area, we live states apart. He has not lived in the same area as me or my fiancé since high school. Much of this evolution with his personality has happened in the last few years as well. I recognize this is not an excuse for the lack of accountability on our part, but felt it added important context that this was not something that was observed and ignored daily, but one that has slowly been recognized over time, since we maybe see him 4 times a year at most. Fiancé was extremely open in conversation, immediately brought up having a conversation with Jay, but admitted to not viewing this as anything more than Jay just being Jay and that he was all talk. At this point, we had only discussed how Jay had continually escalated the situation and how uncomfortable I had now become from this. The lack of accountability fiancé had made for Jay's action definitely hurt, but then I recalled a commenter who had asked if I still considered Jay a friend because he actually was, or because that was how it has always been. To sum up what turned into a lengthier and much more productive conversation with fiancé, I told him that while I recognized his friendship with Jay was something that had always been a part of his life, I did not personally want to be friends with him anymore after this. I brought to fiancé's attention that while the scenario was explicitly about me, and attacking the integrity and character of a 12-year-old girl, every action or usage of the scenario was used against him to invalidate his accomplishments of getting married or make him come off as less than. I told fiancé it was up to him on how he handles his conversation with Jay, but regardless, the disrespect Jay had shown me in this was a clear statement of what he thought of our own personal friendship. I firmly believe it is not my place to force how my fiancé handles his own personal relationship with Jay in this. All of this was deeply taken to heart, and you could tell that fiancé had started coming to his own realizations as the conversation progressed. He recognized that if the roles were reversed, or if it had been any one of my bridesmaids slandering me or him in any way, he would be firmly advocating for me to reevaluate my friendship with them. Fiancé asked for a few days to stomach the information himself and reflect on what he wants to say to Jay. He asked if it would be acceptable for him to bring up that I no longer wanted to be friends with Jay personally, and I said yes. I was clear that if Jay wanted to talk with me following their conversation as well, it would need to be the three of us and not a personal conversation. I am still evaluating how to approach the speeches toasts at our wedding and be open to perspectives and ideas. For now, I reserve the right with my fiancé to omit Jay from giving a speech and having my fiancé choose another groomsman to do so in his place, potentially canceling the speeches toasts altogether, and if Jay is allowed to give a toast, telling the DJ to cut the mic if need be. All of which he agreed with. There is still plenty of time for the situation to develop, and for potential future updates, but I wanted to again thank those that emphasized the seriousness of this issue, gave their honest input and advice on how to handle the situation, and provided perspective on what they believe should be done next. When originally posting, I was still in a state of shock, trying to accept the situation as it had unfolded. Your responses constructively pushed me into the reality of what was happening, and what I was feeling. Relevant comments. Additional info, miserably winning. Wow, I have a couple of comments. How were you fiancé friends with this guy for that long and been okay with his behavior? Why is his best man so comfortable to even joke about something like that? Why does he need time to digest cutting him off? Why is he even still involved in the wedding? Personally, I wouldn't allow anyone to disrespect my significant other, let alone someone I'm supposed to be marrying. Best man or not. I think they are both walking red flags. Jay for being a misogynist and your fiancé for not cutting him out of the wedding and his life. These things can be taken as a joke for sure, but the level of disrespect is too great and your fiancé should stick up for you if he has any shroud of decency and respect for you as his fiancé and soon-to-be wife. OOP happy to answer, since I think it will be helpful for many. I also added a very small edit to the update to acknowledge a bit of this. Much of this behavior has developed over time and apart from all of us. As a kid he always had a superiority complex, but he was also very kind and respectful. It came off more as immaturity than anything else. Plus, at the time, we were kids too. Following high school, Jay and I each moved a significant distance away from where we grew up. He still lives that far away. We get together maybe 4 times a year at most, and I genuinely believe he did not see me as more than some woman to use as collateral to knock his friend down when he made those comments. Fiancé has no brothers, and Jay has always been a part of his life, filling that space. Jay also has no immediate family in his life and hasn't for quite some time, making fiancé's role a bit more impactful. It is much more similar to him cutting off a brother than just another friend. Fiancé has also always been extremely kind and had a very peaceful soul. Don't get me wrong, while fiancé prefers to avoid conflict, he has always been willing to stand up when necessary as well. I don't believe he realized how much had been at his expense as of late until after our conversation. Given their long history, I believe he's reflecting on a lot more than just this specific situation. The wedding is still over a year away, and not until the end of next summer. And this all has happened in less than a week. Neither fiancé nor I have talked with Jay yet, so I did not feel it was right to post about any hard decisions regarding cutting him from the wedding, and so on. These things can be taken as a joke, but the level of disrespect is too great and your fiancé should stick up for you if he has any shroud of decency and respect for you as his fiancé and soon-to-be wife. This was a huge part of the larger conversation we had and something my fiancé acknowledged as well. I think initially, it was viewed under the lens of us collectively being childhood friends, and fiancé as the mediator, rather than the lens of me as his wife until our second, much larger conversation. OOP's reply about the fiancé's reaction: "It's only been a handful of days since this all came to light. I wish your fiancé's reaction had been more about coming to your defense than Jay's, but understand that sometimes people need time to truly process all that contributes to a messy situation, especially one with deep roots and close ties. Thank you for conveying this so well. I did my best to add an emphasis to this, but could not do so as well in my own words and fear it got lost in the length of the post, something for me to work on in future posts for sure. I very much have worries, and knowing my personality, will also be worried day of." I expressed this to my fiancé as well, and he completely understood. I recognize there is still plenty of concern to still address with my fiancé, but given how fresh this situation is, I wanted to afford myself a little grace of absorbing my feelings for what has happened before figuring out exactly what to do. I lost a friend too. New update 2 October 11th, 2024. I'm considering canceling our wedding and calling off our engagement over a pizza. TLDR. After canceling his health insurance without discussion or my knowledge, and a severe lack of support, consideration and accountability, I'm considering calling everything off. Buckle up, because this is a long one. While the drama around my fiancé's best man has simmered, the deeper issues surrounding a lack of support have not. Apologies in advance for this not being centered around my fiancé's best man. Not much has honestly changed. A conversation between them was had, much of which was my fiancé assuring him that things would blow over and accommodating Jay's stresses, that it was only a joke. While my fiancé acknowledged what was said was wrong, the conversation wasn't to set boundaries. I eventually had to have my own conversation with Jay that my fiancé stood silently in the room for. I reached my breaking point 2 weeks ago. Following everything with his best man and a few other challenges we'd been facing, I tried putting my best foot forward these past 6 months. I sought out therapy to address the lack of support and anxiety I was feeling and have made intentional efforts to work on our relationship to ensure we were in a stronger place before committing to each other. In May, after some unexpected and startling health concerns requiring an emergency room visit, my fiancé came clean to me about secretly canceling his health insurance in January without talking to or telling me. When I asked him why, he blamed the cost of the wedding being too expensive and wanting to save the $150 a month, taking no other accountability for his actions, outside of an apology. I have a small amount of experience in accounting and have budgeted the wedding down to the last dollar. This has included the consideration of inflation and other potentials as well. In total, from the smallest decoration to the cost of a marriage certificate, everything comes down to around $22,000, all of which I have strategically budgeted for throughout our 2-year engagement. My parents have graciously given us $14,000 as well to help with the expenses, and I have personally taken on the price of my dress, wedding bands, and a slightly larger portion of the vendors. To put it simply, while it may not be as much as others, we have privilege. Not only was there no need for this cancellation, but I have yet to see any of that additional support for expenses. Regardless, in response, I took it upon myself to take more of the costs on and pursue a part-time job on top of my full-time position that earns roughly $70,000 a year. While it's not by a large margin, I do make the most between us individually, and have a larger responsibility in my daily work life with longer hours and a significant level of expected travel as a result. The choice to take on a part-time role was not one of want, but of desire to ease the burden he was feeling. I started a role reviewing blogs, essays, resumes, and other forms of writing in July, and our relationship quickly unraveled. Because I commute, I typically arrive home 3 hours after my fiancé. After arriving, I would immediately have to hop on my laptop and review writings for the next 2 hours or so to stay on top of my quota. I tried my best to make a routine out of it, so we would have intentional time together once I finished each night. This was met with cold shouldering, frustration, and a lack of consideration for my level of exhaustion and strain for months. Anytime I asked him to choose a show to watch or decide on dinner, he usually does cook because I get home so much later. While I revised, I was met with scoffs and accusations that I no longer cared to tend to our relationship. I tried countless times to address his frustrations and was shut out or cornered in a circular argument about my priorities. 2 weeks ago, I was slated to travel for my full-time position to Atlanta during Hurricane Helene. In a matter of 12 hours, my afternoon flight for the next day was shifted to one leaving at 5 a.m., to give me ample time to shelter in place prior to the arrival of the storm. I rushed home to finish packing and prepare myself to drive over an hour to the airport and stay at a hotel nearby for additional flexibility in case of issues surrounding my early travel that next morning. After arriving home, I immediately hopped in the shower and asked my fiancé to order dinner so we could have one final meal together. During my shower, he offered to order a hot honey, jalapeno, and pineapple pizza from a new place we'd been wanting to try. Which I normally would have been happy to try. However, I don't like jalapeno the way some people don't like cilantro, and am avidly against pineapple on pizza. Something that's come up multiple times during our relationship. And while I'm good with spice, the idea of taking that on with the travel stress and early start time I had the next day made me hesitant. I calmly asked if there was another option for tonight and if we could try that specific pizza once I got home instead, expressing my concerns over my nerves, which received a frustrated scoff and sarcastic response of, "What then, just cheese?" I explained any other topping combination would work, and restated my issues. He walked out of the bathroom without response and I finished my shower. The pizza was never ordered, no food was ordered. I followed up as soon as I got out of the shower, asking if there was another option he wanted or a place he wanted to consider, and received a prompt no. As I finished getting ready, I asked if anything had been ordered again, and no. I finally snapped and begged and demanded him to order the hot honey pizza because I was out of time. He accused me of making him feel like he's forcing me into the decision, but after a bit of back and forth, the pizza was ordered and the mood immediately shifted. Everything was peaceful, warm, and loving at home up until I left. Yet I cried the entire hour and 15-minute drive to the airport hotel. I cried the entire next day, throughout the storm in Atlanta, and the entire day after. Following a lack of sleep, stress, and intense emotions, I had a complete mental breakdown, realizing I can't live like this. I called my fiancé and poured out every frustration, emotion, and feeling, which I admit was probably not presented in the best light, but none of it was well received. In the 2 weeks since, despite many attempts, conversations have gone nowhere, with only ultimatums being offered for me to make. I've proposed countless alternatives that focus on us working on ourselves and together these next few months, but he is only seeking an answer to whether or not we will be getting married next summer, and has made it known this is a decision that must be made by the end of October. At this point, I don't see how I can possibly gain the confidence to commit myself to him by next summer. For the sake of not doubling the length of this post, I will leave it at this for now. All of this is being discussed with my therapist. At this time, he has chosen not to pursue counseling with me, despite my asking and advocating. Many words have been expressed, and I'm trying. But I'm starting to second guess and waver on just how far love can get me through all of this. Wife set me up with her friend's hot sister to test my loyalty on a work trip. When I found out, I was incensed, and now she wants to fix things. Hi guys, I need some advice. I honestly don't know how to deal with this scenario. You can call me clueless, with a big capital C, bold, italicized and underlined. I am 23 years old, and my wife, Amy, not her real name, is 22. We have been married for over 3 months. Amy is a student. She did not begin college until she was 20, so she has completed 2 years thus far. Meanwhile, I make a decent living and am the sole provider. I did not attend college but instead entered the workforce, and things have gone well for me thus far. Amy works part-time at a coffee shop throughout the summer and on weekends, but it's not much, about 15 hours a week, mostly for her own spending money, though she occasionally helps with groceries. I pay for my rent, utilities, groceries, and other household items. Amy has some student loans, but my goal is to pay off as much of her debt as possible, even if it means cutting back on other expenses. I was just promoted at my employer, moving from a union job to management. Here is where the story begins. Last week, I had to travel to headquarters for a week of training, which we term Kool-Aid classes. I flew out the previous Sunday, but owing to a paucity of flight slots, I was unable to book a late enough return trip to complete my training on Friday. So my return flight was scheduled for Saturday morning. Amy wanted to accompany me since, as a newlywed, I imagined she couldn't live without me for a week. However, I am the only one who pays for things, and I adhere to the budget we agreed. I only use one credit card per month, and I make sure to pay it off completely before any interest is due. I calculated the cost of an additional flight, Amy's food expenses, and the cost of adding another person to the hotel room. Then I checked the budget. There just wasn't room for these additional charges. We have an emergency fund of a few $1,000s, and we've started a savings fund for a down payment on a house. It's just over $500 right now, which isn't much, but you have to start somewhere. Amy and I sat down to discuss the budget because I needed her to agree with me. When I told her it wasn't in the budget, she became upset. She asked me to charge it on my credit card, but I declined because we wouldn't be able to pay it off. She proposed tapping the emergency fund, but I clarified that this was not an emergency. I assured her that she would not suffer from my absence for a few nights. I did propose a compromise. Because the company headquarters is approximately 1,200 miles distant and some workers dislike flying, driving was an alternative. I could have leased a car and the employer would have covered the rental and petrol costs. But Amy said she'd rather fly than drive for 2 days in each direction. She was forced to stay behind because flying was not an option. Amy was disappointed that she couldn't accompany me to the airport on Sunday, but she gave me hugs and kisses and had me promise to call her. Things were going well while I was gone. Monday was fantastic. I made some valuable contacts within the firm and met some other managers from other areas. I contacted my wife at lunch after training and again before bed to reassure her that I'd be home soon. Skip ahead to Wednesday morning, and I was having the hotel's complimentary breakfast. I was almost finished when a woman approached my table and asked if she might sit down. I looked around and noticed that all of the tables were full, so I told her I didn't mind because I had additional chairs. I completed my breakfast, stood up and politely said, "Have a nice day," before going away. She jokingly asked, "You're leaving already?" I replied that I needed to get to work. She was about 3 or 4 years older than me, blonde, and attractive, not a 10, but certainly above average. I didn't think much of it at the moment. The next morning, however, I was sitting down to breakfast when the same woman approached and wanted to join me. There were open tables this time, but before I could respond, she remarked, "You ran off yesterday before I could get your name." Despite the fact that I had not agreed, she pulled out a chair and sat. I was uneasy. I am married to Amy, whom I adore. I have absolutely no desire to spend time with another woman. I wasn't very experienced with women. Amy was my third girlfriend and only the second lady I'd ever slept with. We dated for 18 months before I proposed, and we got married 6 months later. Now, as I previously stated, I am nearly 3 months into my marriage. When the woman asked for my name again, I said I had to leave and wished her a good day. My wedding band was prominently displayed on my hand the entire time. I considered telling Amy about the 2 experiences with this woman but chose not to. So when I saw Amy at lunch, I didn't say it. Later that afternoon, when I returned to the hotel, I boarded the elevator and pressed the door close button. The doors abruptly came to a halt as they were about to close. A hand appeared and the woman walked inside the elevator. When she saw me, she smiled broadly and exclaimed, "Well, look who it is." She pressed the elevator button for the 4th level, and as it began to move, she said, "You know, I still don't know your name. How about joining me for a drink so we can get to know each other?" Her hair looked wonderful, and her makeup was just enough to highlight her features without being caked on like it was intended to hide deficiencies. But I wasn't looking at her makeup. She was beaming at me, waiting for a response. The elevator came to a halt and dinged open on the 3rd story, where my room was located. I went out, held up my left hand to show her the gold band and said, "I'm sorry, but I'm married. Thank you for the invitation though, have a lovely evening." I ran down the corridor to my room, not looking back in case she had followed me. When I got to my door, I looked down the corridor to ensure it was empty. Once entering my room, I decided to phone Amy and tell her about the 3 encounters. I thought honesty was the best policy. I had anticipated her to be upset, but she wasn't. The first question she asked was, "Is this woman prettier than me?" The honest response was yes, but that is not what I told Amy. Amy isn't a 10, but she's much above average. As for me, I'll never be on a magazine cover, but I don't consider myself to be ugly, perhaps a touch above average. I've dated lovely ladies before, and this unusual woman was certainly attractive. She was taller than Amy and considerably more top-heavy, if you get my meaning. Amy is cute, more of the girl next door type, whereas this woman was more classy, truly 2 different types. Amy is a brunette, and her long hair works for me. The truth is that I was not tempted by this woman at all. When Amy asked if the woman worked for my company, I told her I didn't know. I'd never seen her before our initial encounter on Wednesday. To avoid stumbling into her again, I decided to forego breakfast at the hotel and eat at the corporate cafeteria the next morning. On Friday morning, I left the motel early. Before going to headquarters, I stopped at the self-service bar for a cup of coffee. As I was closing the lid on my cup, I heard a familiar voice say, "It would have been nice to have had a conversation to go with my drink last night." I turned to see the same woman smiling at me. She apologized, stating, "I'm sorry if I came across too forward. I've been here alone for a week and thought we could converse for a little while." I told her, "Look, I am married and I do not want to spend time with another woman. Please leave me alone." I hastily moved away before she could answer. Sure, that was flattering, but I was quite annoyed by this time. That afternoon, I finished my training and returned to the hotel, half expecting to be ambushed again, but I arrived at my room unharmed. I called Amy, and after we talked for a while, she asked about my plans for the night. I told her I was heading to a sports bar down the street on my last night in town. I skipped a few meals to save enough money for a good steak dinner. Later, I stepped into the restaurant and sat at the bar. I planned to eat my steak, drink a beer, and watch a baseball game on one of the many TVs. That seems good, right? I had ordered my dinner and was aimlessly viewing the screen when I heard that now familiar voice say, "That looks good, can I have a bite?" I turned and there she was, looking lovely and dressed up in a classy way. She showed off her ample cleavage and wore a short dress with stockings, definitely trying to grab my attention. Before I could say anything, she sat down and inquired how my day had gone. I gathered my thoughts and informed her, "I've already told you I don't want to spend time with you. I do not want to talk to you. I don't care what your name is." She replied, "It's Susan," and extended her hand. I did not shake it. I told her all I wanted was to eat my food in privacy and for her to leave me alone. She grimaced briefly, then chuckled and added, "Just take a drink with me." I pledged to behave. "I won't bite, unless you want me to," she said with a mischievous smirk. She ordered a drink and said she'd be right back before leaving to what I imagined was the restroom. I grabbed my wallet, slapped down some cash for dinner and fled out the door. I left my steak sitting at the bar. I returned to the hotel, irritated because, first, I did not receive the remainder of my steak, and second, I paid with my own money rather than the company's since I did not wait for the receipt, so I had nothing to turn in for reimbursement. I could have requested a box to return it to the hotel, but by the time they arrived, she would have returned. I received a poor burger from the hotel and ate it in my room, which the employer paid for. I called Amy before bed to tell her about the botched supper. She apologized and promised to cook me a delicious lunch when I got home tomorrow. That's one thing I have to admit, Amy is an excellent cook. Because she only works a few hours per week, she handles the cooking, cleaning, and laundry. We talked about what we could do this weekend, said "I love you, I miss you," and then hung up. But I went to bed pissed off. I missed out on a wonderful steak. I was angry with the woman who was harassing me, and I was even angrier at myself for not asserting myself more. I'm not sure why I didn't just stand my position, finish my steak and go on. That night, I didn't sleep well. When I arrived home on Saturday morning, Amy greeted me enthusiastically. Before I could go back to retrieve my luggage and unpack, she dragged me into the bedroom for some fun. We're still in the honeymoon phase, so intimacy is fairly often. Even midday afternoon sex is uncommon, but since I had been gone for a week, let's just say I was extremely welcome. We then spent approximately 10 minutes cuddling in bed. I was simply enjoying being with her when she broke the stillness by telling me how much she loved me and kissing me. She told me she was proud of me and kissed me again, and I assumed it was because of my recent job promotion, but then she kissed me again and said she was proud because I passed the test. "What test?" I asked, completely perplexed. She laughed and said, "You know, the test." I didn't understand what she was saying, so I told her so. Then she added, "That woman Susan, you passed the test with her." I was completely confused. I rolled out from under Amy, supported myself on my elbows, and begged her to explain. She smiled, apparently pleased with herself, and explained, "Susan was at your hotel because I asked her to be." Amy continued, "I know she's prettier than me, and I knew you were totally uninterested in her, so I wanted to test you." I sat there, trying to make sense of what she had just said. Amy bent over, kissed me again, and got out of bed, headed for the restroom. She began talking to me from inside, but I was not listening. This was not a test, it was a setup. I told her I didn't appreciate being set up like that. These weren't simply routine tests. When Amy returned to the bedroom, she climbed onto the bed and urged me not to worry about it. "You died, and I adore you for that." She attempted to kiss me again, but I pushed away. I was angry. I began questioning her. Who was this woman? How did she know her, and why would she come to my hotel to test me? I was able to obtain a few details after some argument, with Amy becoming defensive and now angry at me for being mad at her. Susan was the older sister of one of Amy's close friends, Jessica. Amy and Jessica apparently hung together on Sunday after I departed for the airport. Jessica suggested that I consider what I would do if a beautiful woman approached me while on my trip. After some deliberation, they contacted Susan, and the three of them devised this crazy scheme. I asked Amy why she didn't trust me. She insisted she did. When I questioned why she felt the need to set me up if she trusted me, she became defensive again. She blamed Jessica for sowing seeds of doubt in her mind. At that moment, I was outraged. I asked her how Susan got to the city I visited and where she stayed. Amy became quite silent. I increased my voice, and I'm not sure if I started yelling. Amy began crying. More responses, more crying, and me yelling. Finally, I stormed out of the apartment, leaving her sobbing in her hands, insisting that it was not her fault. I slammed the door behind me. Amy had paid for Susan's trip, 4 nights in a hotel, her meals, and even paid her $100 per day for her time. I informed Amy that she couldn't accompany me since we couldn't afford the advance purchase price of an airline ticket, a few meals, and $10 per night for a second person. This was a full fare ticket for 4 nights, at more than $150 per night. How much did all this cost? I haven't added it all up yet, but I can say this: the emergency money is nearly depleted. Because we need an emergency fund, the down payment fund will be transferred to the emergency fund, which has now been depleted as well, all because she let someone to implant dumb ideas in her mind. After leaving, I called my coworker Jacob and told him I wanted to speak with someone. Jacob and I had worked together for a few years before he moved into management 6 months ago. He coaxed me into coming over. He had a number of other buddies over but invited me to join them. I told them what had happened, and one of them suggested Amy had performed a crap test on me. I had never heard of it, but I suppose you are aware of what it is. They reprimanded me for marrying so young. I assumed that was what we were meant to do. They advised me that we should maintain separate bank accounts. I grew up thinking we were meant to combine our assets. Then they chastised me about Amy being an authorized user on my credit card. Okay, I understand how this could have been avoided, but locking the gate now does nothing because the horse has already left. One of the guys recommended I watch some YouTube videos. We saw a couple together after cooking some steaks. Unfortunately, I was too unhappy to eat, so the entire lunch was spoiled. He also told me to write to you, which is what I'm doing. In the end, it's only money, and while I can rebuild my finances, that isn't the purpose. She absolutely ignored everything I was trying to do to alleviate her insecurities. She also set me up. Can I get through this? Amy and I married because we adore each other. I've always seen her as a nice, kind and caring woman, but now I'm torn. What she did has made me rethink who she truly is. I've never set boundaries with Amy. Will it work to sit her down and set them now, or is it too late? That horse is already out. Can you have a relationship with clear boundaries if they are established later and expected to work? I would like to make this work with Amy. Amy began blowing up my phone but I ignored it. Then it was my parents, and finally hers. A few of her pals had also texted me, but I ignored them all. I finally shut off the phone. After spending some time with Jacob, I didn't want to deal with any of them right now. Jacob invited me to stay with him for a few days to sort things out. I would love to hear your comments on this. I'm not sure what my alternatives are. My inexperience has gotten me into this mess, and I need to get my head out of my sass before I suffocate and figure it out. Here are a few things that need to happen. 1. She does not return to school until she repays this sum. 2. Create separate bank accounts. 3. As long as we're married, she won't take out any additional student loans. She pays for them herself. 4. I have already removed her from my credit card and requested that a new card with a different number be supplied. 5. I'm also considering telling her no more Jessica or Susan. She cuts them off totally. Proper now, I don't trust her to make the proper decisions. I got on my phone and texted Amy and both of our parents, telling them I was figuring out how I was going to handle the situation. I told Amy that I would take a sick day tomorrow and come by in the morning to chat to her. Until then, everyone should leave me alone. I am ignoring all texts and voicemails. A nudge in the correct direction would be highly appreciated if you have time to do so. Thank you everyone. Am I the asshole for hating my older daughter for throwing a forbidden party that led to my younger daughter was assaulted by 4 men? First of all, I am a widow with 3 children, but in this essay I will be more focused on Leah, 14, and Maya, 18. 4 guys back in December sexually assaulted Leah. Maya organized a party when I was working the night shift, and 4 of the lads that were there attacked Leah. Said the least, it has been terrible. Leah quit cheering and has lost all of her energy. She also chose to skip her first year by just finishing her classes online. She only wears my late husband's hoodies all day and sleeps in my room now, with me. As a mother, I feel so powerless as I have no idea how I could support her. Many facts came out about Maya's involvement in this over the research. She did not set up her little sister, but I believe she mistreated her greatly. All of this might have been avoided if she only followed my guidelines. I never approved of a party. Before you people argue, well, you're her mother, it's not her job to watch your kid. The issue is, it was her job. She left Leah under supervision. To look after her sister while I work evenings, I pay her really nicely. We had reached an arrangement years ago. Leah is not in any sense special needs. Maya just asked that she make sure her sister finishes her schoolwork and gets to bed at a respectable time. Maya herself invited the guys that attacked Leah. She knew personally that they belonged to gangs and that she had no concern. Rather, what I discovered in this research is Leah was not interested when she sought to be with one of these boys. Trying to entice Leah to kiss him, this lad was pestering her all night. Leah got enough and headed to her room. That same boy and his buddies went up to my daughter's room and sexually assaulted her after Maya left the house to visit McDonald's. The worst aspect of this is that partygoers assumed a couple was fighting upstairs when she started screaming and did nothing. Not knowing what transpired till the party ended the next morning. For her, and most likely the worst experience as a parent, having her do a rape kit traumatizing her. She tested positive for a treatable STD several weeks later as well. Ever since, my baby has been somewhat broken. Leah finds it quite difficult right now, even if they did acquire those males, and all four entered a guilty plea since they had evidence on their phones. Maya has been regretful, on the other side, and Leah has no resentment toward her and does not hold her responsible. She still adores her sister. I'm not sure why though. I've been really trying to forgive Maya, but I can't. I am so furious at her. I can't even look at her right now without wishing to snap. Her prom falls next weekend. I really couldn't give a damn less. She approaches me to have talks, but I find it difficult to express any enthusiasm in them. I love my kid. I do not hate her right now. Only I have a deep detest for her. I have been reading self-help books in search of appropriate ways to handle this. I feel as though in life I cannot be honest with anyone about this. As a mother, I suppose this may be a call for help. Edit. I value all of your comments. Maya still watches Leah, which is the most often asked question I'm seeing. Hell no is the response here. I no longer trust her. It may take years to recover. Right now I'm on a break. Leah is not in treatment either right now. She told me she wouldn't be ready for it. She might be amenable to it once the sentence is over. Maya is in therapy as well, but she misses many of the visits. I'm in therapy as well, and it has helped me not want to snap at Maya and stay cool under pressure. Sending Maya to my parents' house for a little while to gain some separation from her is the one piece of advice I am most strongly contemplating though. Sorry, fast second edit. To my understanding, Maya isn't in a gang, for the people wondering about that. Her most I have seen is smoking some cannabis and vaping. I'm also leaning toward Maya really being plain negligent that night, since I also don't want to believe Maya would ever set her sister to be brutally attacked. Furthermore, I believe it would have surfaced in the research if Leah had purposefully set up herself. The other three were mature men. The lad Maya was trying to arrange Leah for was 17 at the time. He's 18 today. Update: Maya's arrest the evening Leah attacked was rather straightforward. Her charges were 2 misdemeanors and felony child endangerment. She paid a $2,000 fine, 60 hours of community service, and 3 years of probation. The court was rather friendly to her. I grabbed her car as well. But following this update, I might have ought to have punished her more severely. Turning now back to the update, TLDR at the bottom: Thursday afternoon Maya and I got into a fight. Leah came to me virtually agitated and on the edge of tears after 5 people messaged her that day offering sympathies for her attack. Leah has been quite clear, she wants nobody she knows to know she was attacked. After more research, it comes out Maya told a group chat of 27 individuals Leah was the victim. Leah told me she feels ashamed and she can never return to school next year. I naturally then went to confront Maya about it. I was overreacting, she insisted, and Leah was acting dramatically. She did not see the problem when I tried to use reason to explain how she mistreated her sister. She interrupted mid-lecture and exclaimed, "Jesus Christ, Mom, you need to let her deal with this instead of always leaping to her defense. Leah is not unique among women everywhere who experience rape. At least they don't define their personality like she does entirely. She's fine as well." Last night, I actually listened in on her on the phone chatting to a lad. It suddenly clicked for me at that instant when I saw her mask slip and she was not really regretful at all. I answered, "Pack your," saying she would be living with my parents until I let her back. She did exactly that. However, Maya sent a text to meet her at her therapist session later that day the next morning. Looking back, I wish I had never gone, since her therapist only saw her point of view during most of the visit. Maya opened up at the beginning of the appointment, apologizing and outlining her reasoning for telling her pals. She was venting, hence she didn't consider it as a major issue since Leah seems good these days and the public case that was in the news is public. Leah lists as a Jane Doe and has no name, but I digress. We then descended into the smallest details of everything. Maya told me in front of the therapist that she feels emotionally abandoned by me and that I never seemed to care about her trauma in the scenario, which for her, meant having to stay in jail for a weekend and losing one of Leah's literal rapist buddies. Though I wish I could be laughing, I am dead serious. We discussed that for 30 minutes first. Given their father is no longer with us, her therapist said I should strive more to be Maya's mother and guilt-tripped me for not being more emotionally present for her. Though I am a terrible parent, I do not want to be emotionally present for Maya if it means supporting her and gassing over the relationship of the person who destroyed her sister's life. Maya has been telling Leah that the therapist was on one, particularly because she continued referring to what occurred to Leah as an accident or stating Leah seems happier these days. Leah actually still scores fairly low on mental health assessments yet is rather physically high on antidepressants. Feel free to skip over the next paragraph if I simply had an outburst since I become quite graphic here and have a major trigger warning. I think it's kind of nasty that the two of you are ignoring Leah's trauma in all of this and keep referring to it as an accident, I told Maya and her therapist. Your sister was in the hospital suffering from something your friend did. You spent a weekend in jail. Ironically enough, if you ever listen to Leah, she has said that your friend was the most hostile toward her throughout the attack and was the source of most of her injuries, including strangling her. So for you both to sit here and criticize me for not caring that you lost your friend due to something horrible your friend did to your sister is just nasty. Right now, my main regret is helping you choose a lawyer. I ought to have let you figure it out for yourself and perish in that jail. At this time Maya began crying in the office, claiming it unfair that I held her responsible for Leah's fate. Leah kept hovering near to her at the party, so she told me the only thing she was attempting to do was get Leah out of her shell. Interjecting suddenly, the therapist asks Maya, how did Leah respond to you when you apologized? In such a protective way, Maya responds, apologize for what? I did not sexually harass her. When the therapist mentioned it, even she was startled, and at that moment I was startled and at that moment I had heard enough. I got to stand, raise my hands and go. This was Friday afternoon. I haven't seen Maya since then. Maya has been messaging and calling me, pleading to come home so she might apologize to Leah and me, but at this point I'm not sure. I never imagined I would be the parent who would have no contact with my kid, but I'm not sure whether I could live around her. She is not repentant about what happened. I cannot trust her. Part of me wants to try to make it work for Leah since she asked yesterday if she destroyed our family, and it crushed my heart. Leah adores and looks up to Maya. I doubt she can understand at this point that Maya also failed her. I simply find myself caught. Tell me if I'm wrong for not grasping Maya though. I apologize for the not very cheerful update. I should thus say what happened that morning. By now I go home from work at 8:30 a.m., and my house was wrecked and several of Maya's buddies were still there. Of course, I argued with Maya a little regarding party planning. When I checked on Leah later, she was not in her room but her linens were bloody. Maybe it was the time of the month and she was sleeping or washing in my bed. But as I looked about my room, she was nowhere. When I started phoning Leah, her phone did ring. I heard it emanate from my closet. It's a walk-in, and I observed her cocoon-like blanket-covered state. She wasn't awake when I shook her to get her going. When I tried to untuck her, I discovered abrasions around her neck and bleeding on her scalp. I began yelling for someone to dial 911. Leah started crying when she started to sort of wake up in the ambulance. Maya's friend raped her, and she first told me she couldn't get up since she was in so much pain. I honestly didn't care about Maya at that time when the cops and ambulance arrived. I advised her to be truthful with the cops and she ought to be okay. I knew nothing as I know today. They then drove her to the station where the cops questioned her. Leah's medical report revealed what had transpired, hence they chose to accuse her with child endangerment. When they told Maya what happened to Leah, I did not observe her response. I considered it to be a lovely moment nevertheless when she hugged Leah once she was released from jail. From that period, the only red flag that jumps out to me is Maya's partial lack of cooperation about the distribution of the names. She claims she forgot. Fortunately, DNA from Leah and the crime scene, all four of Leah's rapists were already in the system for earlier offenses, one even on probation, so they were readily found. Following that was a domino effect. My son is my oldest. He married a month before things fell apart, and I wanted him to savor the honeymoon period with his wife, so I didn't want to draw him in too much about Maya. His wife is quite helpful, and she takes Leah all the time for sleepovers, or just to get her out of the house. Although I know I'm not alone in dealing with this, my daughter F14 has been quite understandably depressed. In 4 years, at her early age, she experienced 2 horrific events. She lost her dad 4 years ago and suffered sexual assault back in December. I recall feeling as though the world was against me when I was 14, with both of my parents on my side and having never experienced an assault. I find it incomprehensible what she is going through right now. I asked her if she was okay when I heard her sobbing in the bathroom this morning. She said promptly she was okay. It just makes me feel so powerless as her mother, as I am unable to assist her or alleviate any of her suffering. Since both of my parents are still living and I have never been sexually molested, I cannot even completely identify with her. Since I cannot advise her and assist her with the current circumstances, I feel like I'm a bad mother. As a mother, I believe I should know everything. Unfortunately, I do not. I feel like 99.9% of the time I'm not sure what I'm talking about, hence every time I try to comfort her she most likely wonders, what is this woman talking about? Please leave some useful advice if any other mothers can relate. 3 children of mine are M24, F18, and F14. 4 years ago, COVID claimed the late husband quite unexpectedly. He lacked a will, but our life insurance policy paid a $360,000 death benefit. As his wife, I paid the whole cost. I chose to split the money 4 ways. I would get $120,000 and each of my 3 children would get $80,000. Since my kids were minors at the time, I promised them they could access their whole amount when they reached 18. Still, I would let them utilize some of their portion if they ever wanted to do something expensive. I looked after most of their requirements. I handed my son his portion immediately away as he was over 18. This was a verbal commitment, and I meant to follow through exactly. But recently, my middle daughter, let's call her M, was jailed in December for child endangerment after brutally mistreating her little sister, which resulted in something terrible happening under her care. She left roughly $65,000 after deducting some of her $80,000 for attorney and court fees. Fast forward to now, and my youngest kid is still somewhat challenged. She is on a high dosage of antidepressants and shows quite poor on mental health assessments during her visits. She usually jokes that she would be sent to a psych facility if she told the doctors or us how she really feels. Maya is no longer living with us. She is staying with my parents for now, as I felt her presence was causing more damage than benefit to her sister. She has been pleading with me, nevertheless, to have the money I promised once she graduated. I have not been eager to do so. Familiar with the circumstances, my sister thinks Maya doesn't deserve the money and I should use it to keep home longer with my younger son, who will be alone throughout the day once I get back to work. Given my youngest's poor mental health and school being closed, I'm quite concerned about her. Maya is headed to start college, and I know most of the money would go toward that. Still, I am quite furious with Maya for the suffering she brought about for her sister. Making this choice is proving difficult for me. So supposing I retained her inheritance. Edit. Although I wasn't expecting so many comments, I am reading over all of them. I am conflicted since I honestly have no idea what my spouse would say if he were here. Part of me wants to believe he would really say to give Maya the money so she could attend college since he valued education highly. Another side of me too, knows that he would be far more harsh than I am and maybe disown Leah completely if he had known the whole truth about what happened to her. I'm conflicted as it's difficult to project what he would have desired. Update 2. Leah, my 14-year-old daughter, has been battling the fallout from the horrific act she went through last December. For us, this past week has been particularly challenging. Last Tuesday everything began when a sheriff and another officer paid us a visit. One of the persons in charge of what happened to Leah, the person who videotaped the incident, had uploaded the footage to a group and now it's floating on some dark websites. Recorded in Leah's room, the footage included recognizable artifacts indicating her school attendance. When I heard this, I was crushed. The way Leah responded startled me. She exhibited little emotional expression or tears. She just shrugged and murmured, "I figured," then sat there silently. Although the officials informed us that it is unusual for offenders to come back in these kinds of circumstances, they felt obliged to let us know for safety concerns. Leah returned appearing as though nothing had occurred, almost too happy after they departed. She dodged the subject, although I tried many times to discuss it. This conduct persisted all week until she abruptly said she wanted to read her victim impact statement herself in court instead of allowing the prosecutor to do it. She believed that, lacking a trial, only the charges against those accountable were known, not the whole truth of what she went through. Her comment is a thorough narrative of that terrible night, but she has not been able to read it to me in whole, as every time she tries she starts to cry. I only witnessed her really expressing her emotions at that one moment. Leah seemed especially happy all week until Saturday night and noted sleeping early, about 8 p.m. until I got a call from one of Leah's best friend's mother. I gave it little thought. Leah's last message to her daughter, a note expressing love and requesting her to check on her, worried her. Leah had tried to overdose on Zizquil when I hurried to her room. Knowing she would recover as a nurse, it broke my heart to see her waking in the hospital. She shrieked, "Why couldn't you just let me die? Mom, I want to pass." Feeling their hands on me wears me out. I want it to stop now. Please allow me to pass away. To help her relax, they had to knock her out. Leah was then put under a 72-hour psychiatric hold and then moved to a mental health hospital surrounded by peers her age. Leah has been suffering, particularly with a male staff member, maybe a psychiatrist who she claims has been asking intrusive questions about her personal life, making her uncomfortable. The staff advised staying longer than the first hold. Leah seems distant and staff members told me she is not joining in group activities. They even suggested limiting her access to me, but I asked them to hold off on putting such policies into effect. Given Leah's seeming trouble adjusting, I'm not sure if the inpatient environment we have now is appropriate. Her cry for her life to end haunts me still. It is a concept I cannot get rid of. Leah's buddy sent further information Leah had concealed from me. There is a nasty story going around that Leah had voluntarily engaged in something dangerous, and the cops were only involved out of shame. Young people can be rather nasty. Regarding my second daughter, Maya, 18, I haven't chatted with her in 2 weeks. I recently found, though, why Leah feels obligated to her. I discovered unsuitable texts on Leah's phone 2 years ago between her and Maya's ex-boyfriend. Saying Leah was much prettier and that he loved her yet inexperienced, he showed affection for her and even likened her to Maya. Maya was enraged and broke off with me when I told her, but she thought Leah had betrayed her by seeing her boyfriend. Even though Leah was just 12 at the time and her boyfriend was 17. Maya avoided Leah for 3 months following, and even with Leah's apologies, Maya still harbors resentment. Leah feels guilty about hurting their friendship with this episode. I'm sharing this to get it off my plate. I have kept these battles inside our family to guard my girls, but I am tired from always facing fresh difficulties and not sure how to heal them. I now find myself in the challenging role of determining Leah's mental readiness to testify at the sentencing for her abuser, though I wonder if she is in a stable enough position to manage a possibly traumatic occurrence, particularly since these guys genuinely have character witnesses. I worry she will blame me for this decision. Update 3. Additional details regarding the psychiatrist. Leah and I discussed what the psychiatrist said to make her uncomfortable more specifically. She informed me they made her sit down one-on-one to debrief why she was there and what was triggering these ideas when I left. She told him about the attack and opened up to him. But he wanted to know whether this was her sole sexual encounter. Leah answered yes, but he kept challenging her as if he didn't believe her, asking things like, "You can tell me if it wasn't your only experience. I am not going to inform your mother." Leah had to remind him again several times that it was her sole experience. He next inquired about her sexuality and whether she still found guys appealing. Leah claims she does not now give relationships any thought. She said she felt uneasy about him probing her sex life so much when they were alone in a room with the door closed. Although the psychiatrist might have been performing his duties, I would not accuse him of being improper. Rather, I believe he ought to have had a female staff member there or probe such issues. Before they met, he ought to have seen her chart. Update 4, back here with a much-awaited update. This runs long. TLDR at the bottom. Though much has happened, I will begin with something encouraging. Leah began treatment following her sentence, and she has been sharing good things about it. She said it was relieving not having to discuss the assault straightforwardly with her therapist. Her therapist recommended some EMDR sessions as well. Her first one is set for next week. Her general doctor advised she start birth control and cleared her to begin cheering once more should she so wish. I'm not sure about it as I know how much it can affect mental health and I want not to undo any advancement. We also moved into our new rental, and I let Leah pick a kitten, her baby. Leah always carries the cat with her, so I hardly see it since we bought it. To aid Leah in her recovery process, we had to toss most of her old furnishings. She used to like the things I used to, but now she wants the minimum color. I was attempting to show her the Pinterest room of her dreams. It is still being worked on. She currently boasts a boyfriend as well. Out on the 4th, he invited her. He is age appropriate, and I have known the child since I grew up with his dad, so I know he comes from a decent home. Leah appears like she could be developing codependency on him, which worries me the only thing. He is on FaceTime with us if he is not at our house. She wants him to tag along every time we go out. This has been happening since he asked her out formally. As Maya moved out, I would say it's been like this. Yet I'm not very concerned as I believe it's only like this now since it's summer and a fresh relationship. She seemed at first to be happy for the occasion. My last post drew a lot of critical comments as I wasn't informing my kid all the specifics or moving quickly enough. Though I almost wanted not to share this, I want to start by noting that I know my children and they know me. Timing is something I respect personally. I wanted to be sure I had facts, not presumptions, before I spoke with my other children. I knew in my heart that I tried my best to make my daughter answerable for her acts. I wanted to arrange a meeting with the detective who questioned Maya to tell him everything. The detective informed me he investigated Maya but lacked sufficient proof when we met. It wasn't enough to accuse her, even with all I told him. So he could only accuse her of child endangerment for leaving a juvenile she was supposed to be supervising in a house with a documented sex offender. He soothed me though, and confirmed what I had thought. He also informed me Leah reportedly spent almost 2 hours being assaulted twice by 2 of the suspects. Maya was arrested as she never went upstairs to see Leah and showed no sympathy during questioning. He also mentioned that he has looked into several similar cases, but this case troubled him since so many onlookers realized something sinister may be occurring but did not act. He told me to bear that in mind. Everyone failed Leah, not only Maya. Before the sentencing, I visited with my son and his wife. More dissatisfied than offended was his attitude. Though he knew something was amiss, he assumed Maya wouldn't act purposefully. My son and daughter-in-law told me they always believed Leah made Maya jealous or threatened. When Leah removed her braces, my son observed that she started to grow into her appearance, drawing greater interest from Maya's friends. Leah was the nice sibling amongst the two. According to my daughter-in-law, she personally saw this during the bridesmaid dress fitting. Maya attacked Leah instead of complimenting her. Maya responded, "I know, that's why I have to humble her." When my daughter-in-law informed Leah that Leah would unlock so much potential once she saw her beauty and ignored her bullies. Though she considered it odd at the time, my daughter-in-law didn't give it much attention until recently. Maya blocked them as soon as I tossed her out too, and today they know why. The sentence was not as harsh as I'd anticipated. Leah admitted she first found it to be dull. Of course, the mothers and fathers of the offenders were the character witnesses. One mother reported that it was a terrible night and that we should stop aggravating additional damage. One dad claimed his kid had been mistreated at Leah's age and that Leah had to have set off something inside him. Leah found nothing impressive about this. She said she ignored them, but I sensed it bothered her. I was so very proud of Leah when she chose to create a video and read her victim impact statement. Leah didn't look at all 4 of the offenders even though they all said apologies to her before the court. She heard them and thought only one was really remorseful. The rest responded robotically. 2 of the offenders were sentenced to 10 years, however they might be released 6 years early. Because of his past offenses, the person who filmed it received 12 years. The prosecutor warned me he might be in there for 20+ years due to a different charge. Leah's friend Maya, who she most worries about, received 14 years. The judge noted that he should complete the whole term and not be paroled as he had past difficulties for something similar. Leah wanted them all to be 14 years, but she was good with their sentences. Should they leave early or should there be parole hearings, she will be informed. My son said Maya was present but she stayed far back and departed right away when the court adjourned. Leah was particularly disturbed by some of the families of the offenders trying to personally apologize to her and chat with her. Apart from that, she managed it really nicely. We started debriefing everything while we were driving back home, and I tried to explain the next steps. Leah informed me it was strange that one of the offenders called Maya friend when we arrived home as Maya would not be friends with someone like that. She stated this and my face went white. I realized it was time to tell her. I said, "I had been intending to tell you this. I'm not happy with your sister for several different reasons." Leah was still perplexed, so I clarified that Maya was arrested for leaving the house, not for throwing the party. Leah simply said, "Oh okay, not giving a damn about that." Then I answered, "He wasn't lying in front of the courts. Maya went behind your back that evening to attempt to set you two up. Maya was friends with your sister." I then witnessed the flash of insight. Leah first assumed I was lying, but as I continued to speak, it was as though she watched someone's heart break before her eyes. She interrupted me off and remarked, "I don't believe you. Maya would never hang around with someone that terrible. She might not have been best friends with him, but she did have some kind of relationship with him," I said. "Mom, if that's true, that's really bad," Leah said. "None knows how nasty he was to me all day. I had to sit in the courtroom listening to people claim he was a wonderful person although it is untrue. Why does nobody agree with that?" I started apologizing to her at this time, and she grabbed her phone to call Maya. Maya responded with a really happy, "Hello." And Leah went right to the point asking whether Maya had ever been friends with her offender. Maya admitted she was friends with him before anything happened, even though I really believed she would lie. Leah then inquired as to whether she was attempting to get her to date him. And Maya answered honestly and positively. Leah hung off on her before Maya could clarify herself. Leah began shaking rather severely while she was tapping on her phone, and I knew she was blocking Maya on everything. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes once she was done and asked, "Mom, why does she hate me so much? Whatever I did to her, she still hates me. I have been trying to be her buddy. Why?" Over the course of the day we shed tears together. To be honest, Leah told me the next day she had finished with Maya and wanted nothing to do with her for some time. She stated she felt more enraged than depressed after sleeping on it. She opened out to me and that she wrecked her senior year, hence Maya made her feel ashamed. Leah blamed herself for what happened by not being more cautious and not locking the door. Yet, to now discover that she did lock the door and that Maya had far more control of the circumstances than she led Leah to believe makes her very unhappy. Leah then informed me Maya promised she was quitting, but she had a drug issue with Adderall and medications she had agreed to keep secret. When I asked Leah when her drug addiction first started, she stated she was unaware. Nonetheless, she found her pilfering her concerta in April 2023. Maya then came clean on her drug problem. Leah also thinks Maya's dealer was among her attackers since he used to visit the house late at night while I was working. Leah suffers greatly since Maya traded her for more drugs and never quit as she had promised. Leah further related that her assailant claimed during the attack that if she refused to participate, they would harm Maya, which would make her feel worse since she knows Maya wouldn't do the same for her. Although it was a few weeks ago, that was the last time we truly discussed Maya. I know she is suffering greatly. I went crazy and let her get a cat for this reason. Maya has tried to get in touch with Leah many times utilizing text-free numbers even though she is not sure of our new address. Leah exhibits no curiosity at all. Maya has been taken in by my mother-in-law, with whom I have never gotten along, paying for her education and purchasing her a new automobile just to spite me. She is no longer with my parents. She shared it on Facebook, but I wish I were making this up. The dysfunctional aspect is that although my mother-in-law is aware of what happened to Leah and all Maya accomplished, she simply doesn't care. Using their dad as leverage, she called Leah to guilt trip her, saying, "Your dad would hate to see you fight and hold a grudge against your sister over a mistake." Maya believes Maya is equally a victim as Leah. I stopped talking to her at that point and advised Leah not to answer her going forward. Since my mother-in-law wants to discredit my parenting and harm her other granddaughter by funding Maya's life, I am quite near suing Leah civilly on her behalf. Though I'm so annoyed with the situation, my therapist believes that will not help Leah or me heal. I'm sorry. I'm not doing well and there isn't another ending except that I lost 3 individuals in 4 years. I am quite hopeless. Both of my girls and the love of my life vanished from me. I will never be the same. I still grieve the loss of my small daughter. I also blame myself for not seeing my other daughter in time as I think she is a profoundly defective, dangerous person. I worry about everyone she encounters in her adult years.